Okay, we're live. Hi, Nicole.
Awesome. Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good.
Good. We're so glad to have you today.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
Yeah, we've been sitting around waiting for this to happen, so let's get right to it.
Cool. So, right here I have a Tocena splendida cicada, which is pretty cool. It's from, this one in particular I got from Thailand. So right now I'm just doing a wash, and I'm just using some black, just straight on the canvas, just so I'm covering up the white. You can judge my values a little bit better.
Do you want to talk about the colors on your palette real quick?
Yeah, so trying to keep, my palette has kind of grown over time. Sometimes I condense it again, but usually I try to get warm and cools of the colors and transparents. So I have like a bright yellow cooler, and then it kind of goes down the scales. I don't know exactly what you want to know about the colors.
But some people, they like to know exact color that you have on there. But to me, I'm more about just some warm, cool yellows.
Yeah, so usually I worry more about the temperature.
Yeah.
Rather than the actual color.
That's a better advice than the actual, like, the brand and the exact color. Because you can always mix whatever color you want.
Yeah. So I like to start with a pretty dark color just to kind of draw out my cicada. Usually I'll kind of mark generally where the center will be. And I kind of like the abdomen of the insect when I'm doing insects to kind of be the center of the painting. So I'll kind of do some lines where I want kind of the bottom to be. And cicadas have 3 sections on their bodies, so I'm kind of measuring out with those sections.
So as an insect artist, do you also know all the facts and scientific things about the insects that you paint?
Yes, definitely. It's a little bit of an obsession.
Which is good.
I mean, it's been great to be able to merge both interests of like art, and I studied entomology for a while, so to be able to combine that is really awesome. But usually when I'm painting the insects, I really enjoy it because I get super into the one I'm painting and just like going through facts in my head. And
good, so we can learn a lot today about these amazing creatures.
Oh, definitely. Cicadas are one of my favorite. This is actually one of the first insects I bought. This cicada, because they're just incredible insects. And so, as you've probably heard, there's the 17-year cicadas. So what's really special about those cicadas is they're called the magic cicadas, and they emerge every 17 years. And what is really cool is they're one of the only species of cicadas that emerge all together. Because some cicadas,
all together, right?
yeah, all at the same time. Where there's other species of cicadas, why there's cicadas that we see every single year, is because they don't emerge all together. So even though they're under the ground for 9 years, they emerge at different times.
That's why we see them kind of all over the place, because the staggered schedule in a way, right?
Yeah. But this species is actually the largest emerging of insects in the entire planet, which is why it's such a big deal. So I'm just getting to kind of say what I'm doing, lighter gray to kind of mark out where I want the light side of the insect to be. Just to kind of break out, I'm wanting to break it into big shapes of like just light and dark so I can distinguish where my shadows are gonna be and highlights. But yeah.
So today we're just doing a simple study in a way of the cicada, but normally when we see your artwork, you have a pretty good design, and there's really a lot of design elements in a lot of your insect paintings, right?
Yeah, so I really love motifs, and love looking at biology books and the scientific sketches they have in there. So I like applying those to my paintings. In some of my studies of plants, I'll kind of just throw in the background. That's kind of my solution. If the background's too dull, I just pull some studies of plants from my sketchbook and just throw them in the background. And adding plants and bugs to things are always a great solution.
I love how intense your color is already.
Yeah, so I try to keep it like my darks. I did the transparent red oxide and the blue just to try to keep the colors as intense as possible, because it's a lot easier for me to gray down the colors than it is to warm them up and make them more intense. And that's actually one of the special things about the Cicada species, is because you notice on this cicada, you don't usually see cicadas with these blue fluorescent colors on their wings, which is quite unique to this species.
I like how you were able to get really sharp edge with that brush.
Yeah, I really
It's
like flat brushes. I work a lot with flat brushes, just because I like the sharp lines that they create. So I try to keep, in the very beginning, my lines very straight and almost posterize the insect and make it into a geometric shape. Just because it's a lot easier to get straight lines accurate than it is to get a circle or curved lines. Yeah. So that kind of helps make the insect a little more accurate with what I'm looking at if I keep it just having straight lines as possible at the beginning.
The interesting fact is you actually went through pretty good training, not insect painting training, but more like portrait and drawing training.
Yeah, so I did apprenticeship with Casey Childs, which was awesome. And yeah, so that was really great, and I learned a ton doing that. And then I did a lot of just networking with other artists, which also really helped with that training.
Here in Utah or all over the place?
Here in Utah mainly. That was a huge thing I did ever since I was like really little, was just networking like crazy.
And that's how we met you, right? We're just networking.
Yeah. So like when I was 14, really started getting serious about networking. I had a high school teacher, Mary Reeder, that was like, go volunteer at the Springville Museum and meet artists. And I look really young, which kind of helped with my networking. But when I looked like I was 12, and at the time, Vern Swanson was the dean at the museum, and it was quite funny because I kind of stopped what I was supposed to be doing and just followed him around while he was critiquing artists. It was like having my notes out and just taking notes, and finally after a while he stopped and he was like, okay, who are you? What are you doing?
Like, why are you following me around?
Like, he thought I was just this like little 12-year-old following me around. But yeah, so he introduced me to a whole bunch of artists and was like, okay, this is what you need to do, and go find an artist you like and do an apprenticeship. So he is the artist that actually introduced me to Casey Childs. He's an art historian. I was 14 at the time, so I followed Casey Childs for a long time, and then he had a reveal of the Joseph Smith martyrdom painting he did. So I went to that and then started going to his model sessions, and then asked if I could study with him, and so it kind of progressed from there. But yeah.
And if any, say, like tips for young emerging artists or even young artists, like 14-year-olds? You just go
yeah,
ask, right? Just
go ask, and the art community is so nice. If you just go ask and be like, hey, I'll clean brushes for you and
do whatever it takes.
do whatever just so I can watch you paint. And I mean, most of the time they'll say yeah, and you get to watch and learn all these tips, and it can just be super helpful for your growth.
Yeah. Just don't be shy. Don't sit around. Don't sit in the basement thinking you're doing really good art, and if you just sit there, people will notice you.
Yeah, you have to be out there and go to events. In some art events, I actually thought were kind of boring, but just being there and networking with people can be huge. Even if you don't think it's particularly helpful or for you, for like the direction of art you're going in. Like even if you're into painting and it's a sculpture workshop, you can learn so much.
Oh, tell me about
from,
that.
Yeah.
Even just listen to Ben Hammond talk, you learn so much about anatomy that you can ever learn from a lot of other things that you do.
So so if you just like go to that, even if you're like, I'm not into sculpture, it's not for me, you're networking with other artists and you can learn just so much of where I apply a lot of principles of sculpting. Like right now, for example, I'm trying to get as much just shapes and paint down as possible. So kind of like with clay, so I have something to mold with. If you don't put that clay down first, you're not going to have something to mold around and actually correct and make accurate shapes out of. Yeah, so I apply a lot of those principles that I learned from other artists doing other subjects and things all the time. Right now, with all these fine lines in the wings of the cicada, I'm trying to just generalize the shape, and then I'll come back and put some of those highlights and details in the wings later.
Build the cake first, frost it
Yeah.
later. I've been hearing that a lot lately as we do more demos and stuff. Sounds like cake making is another good hobby to get into if you want to be an artist.
Yeah. I really like cicada wings. They're awesome. They're
translucent in a way.
Yeah, they're translucent. They're also they're super cool. So they have these tiny cones and spines in their wings that create this film, which kind of helps create that sheen that you see in their wings. This makes them waterproof, which is pretty cool. But what's super cool is the spikes, actually when bacteria lands on their wings, the spikes will tear apart the bacteria's membrane.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Repeat, rewind,
okay,
say it again.
So when bacteria lands on their wings, the spikes and spines on the film will tear up the bacteria membrane. So they're the only biomaterial known that is able to kill bacteria.
What are we doing with coronavirus then?
I know.
We
should have used cicada wings.
No, don't listen to me. Don't eat cicadas.
I mean, they are edible.
Yeah, it's true. But we don't want to tell people to do the things that they should not be doing to fight coronavirus.
Just go around and eat cicadas.
Yeah. It's not proven,
I don't think that that's the cure, but...
Yeah. But it is cool for them to protect themselves that way in nature.
Oh, it's super cool. And it's like there's not really biomaterial that's able to destroy and tear apart bacteria. So it's super cool. So usually with the background, I don't like to do, usually I like to make an off-white. I'm really into like greens lately.
Yeah. Speaking of background, I love your background. Just the way you handle the paint and the texture.
Oh, thank you.
It's really unique.
Yeah, so usually I'll start with the background, just getting the paint down, and then I'll come back afterwards with a palette knife and just have some fun with the texture.
So we kind of talk about your personal interest in a bit. That's why you got into this insect painting.
Yeah.
And did you just kind of go from there, start collecting the first one and go on and on?
I've been collecting insects since I was really little. My parents were very patient with letting me and my brother just have and raise insects in the house. And
Well, don't say that in
yeah,
front of my son.
it
He's
was
here. He's the one who always brings in stuff.
Yeah,
You
it
go to-
was
yeah,
it was a
anyway.
little nuts, but it was a lot of fun and I learned a ton. So I already had a pretty good collection. How it started was I didn't think of painting insects until I had to do a still life as an assignment. And I don't have a lot of man-made objects. I just kind of find them boring. So I needed to find something, but I had an insect. So I'm like, well, here we go. It was actually a cicada that I painted first. It was an Ecuadorian cicada that my dad actually brought home from his mission. And so I painted that and it was awesome. And I had a lot of fun. And it was well received. A lot of people really enjoyed it and was like, you should do a series of these. And I was like, I mean, have plenty of subjects.
Yeah,
So.
there's bugs all over the place.
Oh, yeah. So then I just started going from there and fell in love with it.
Is that how you kind of get into the gallery with this specific subject matter?
Yeah, with the insects, my work got sent to Myers Gallery and
How
I
did
liked
that get
it.
started?
And so I worked on a series, and then Casey Childs actually sent in a referral because he was with the gallery.
Hence the importance of
Networking.
You
Yes.
never know. You never know.
You never know the
Right?
connection. And so, yeah, so because of that referral, I was able to talk to them. And yeah, so that's been awesome. They've been really great to work
And that's
with.
the great thing about the art world. It's if someone sees talent, they help you. Good mentors.
Oh, yeah.
Good mentors. Don't get me wrong. There's
And-
always, not everybody's nice, but if you network,
But in general,
they're
are
really nice.
Yeah.
Right?
And people have this, I find a lot of new artists have this idea that artists aren't going to share their information, they're going to keep their secrets, and I'm like, generally that's not true.
Yeah.
You get them talking, and some artists won't stop.
And
They just love
yeah.
to share the information.
And also, it all
yeah.
depends on, that's why we say you want to network as much as you can, right? Because the
Oh,
more
yeah.
you network, the more you know people,
Mm-hmm.
and you get a sense of what type of artists you're hanging with. Because,
Yeah.
there's always all kind of artists, but the more you network, the more you create that sense of, this is my type of people, all that stuff, and then find your own crowd in a way.
It helps you find your own voice. People ask me all the time, like, how you can find your own style. And I'm like, it just comes with learning. And if you're networking and getting involved with just a whole bunch of artists, that style will naturally come almost as a natural cause of getting to know and interacting with a whole bunch of artists. Because you just learn and, like, I like this that this artist did. And you kind of take that principle, and I like this technique that this artist did. And combining it, you kind of end up making your own style. Right. One thing that's also pretty cool about cicadas is they're most known for their sound.
Can you make that
They're-
sound?
I cannot.
Okay. Just curious, because
yeah.
some people, they're really gifted
To like make insect sounds.
Or it's really unique. That's my point.
Yeah.
Their sound is so unique.
It's pretty cool because how they make the sound. A lot of people think they just like rub their wings together like crickets. They actually have a separate organ called thimbles, which are like a second set of ribs.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and they'll move their abdomen back and forth to click the ribs together. And then what makes them so loud is that their abdomen acts like a guitar, almost like a guitar, and amplifies the sound, which is super cool. And some other insects have this too, like there's some moths. The tiger moth has thimbles as well. But theirs are a little more high-pitched, so human ears can't hear them, but bats can, so they scare off bats with those. But cicadas use their body to amplify the sounds. They make some of the loudest insects in the world, which are pretty cool. It's like crazy. They make the sound with an extra set of ribs.
And I think a lot of people, like people say, oh, how do you find your voice? Well, first you gotta have passion about something. Like you love insects, and then you just learn more and more. As you learn more and more, in a way, you develop your voice because you enjoy doing stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I find if you're living like a full life and really kind of letting yourself have those hobbies and interests, those interests kind of give a voice to your art. If you're
substance.
Yeah.
Right?
If you're not living a
posing
full life and just trying to paint stuff, it's going to be pretty difficult and tricky. It's a lot easier if you are interested in something, so you have something to say. But
it'll be a torture if you don't like insects at all and you're painting insects all day.
Oh, that would be horrible. But yeah.
And then you sit there and wonder, well, how do I find my voice? But it's basically subject matter. It's one big thing in the art world. You gotta find a subject that will work. But if you don't love it, then
it's gonna be more difficult.
Yeah.
So now, since I have some of these bigger shapes, I'm gonna start breaking down some of the smaller shapes of the insect. So I'm gonna put in some of these darker shapes that I see in here, but also breaking down. So I'm gonna put in some of the dark shapes of some of the lines. Usually I do the legs very last, just because they're so thin and not the main interest, so I don't usually spend a whole bunch of time on the legs.
You can always just pop it in at the end.
Yeah. It's always fun to pop them in over like really thick paint too.
That's what I like about your legs. Now I know the secret.
And paint them over thick paint.
Do you use the knife for it?
No. Usually I do the knife just like for the background, and then do the legs, just kind of almost dig in the paint a little bit and then lay some highlights on top, but I'll try to get to one so you guys can see.
So besides insects, you also do portrait work, right?
Yeah. So that's pretty fun. I really enjoy portraits when I need a break from insects.
We need a break from this?
Well, not very often, but like for like a mindset, sometimes it's good to try something else. Every time I do a portrait, I find my insects have improved and vice versa.
So what would you say that's your signature?
Probably the insects.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of happened on accident, but
I can totally see that you add a
people know me for the insects and the portraits kind of on the side. But yeah.
It works.
It works. I really enjoy it.
Find what works for you. And
oh, yeah.
If you find the market, then stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can evolve from there as you go and just find more and more opportunities.
Yeah.
But
no, it's been awesome.
On the door, then take that call.
And if it's one that I really enjoy,
yeah,
might as well take it.
Do you find painting insects kind of like doing portrait work in a way?
I find it very similar. It's just I use the same exact techniques. It's just different shapes. But yeah, so I have the same approach to painting portraits. But yeah, so it's pretty similar.
Yeah, there's symmetry in it, and all these other things that you would expect from a portrait is there, right?
Yeah.
Value, shapes, temperature.
It's just the same. I find that a lot of the principles in paintings are kind of, once you learn them, they kind of tie together. I kind of compare it to playing instruments. Because once you learn a whole bunch of instruments, all of a sudden that knowledge kind of crosses over into other instruments pretty easily. Kind of like why people learn the piano as a bass, because it's kind of like if you learn drawing as a base, then a lot of those principles can be applied to other parts of your art.
Hey, Elliot. He made it.
Oh,
So he's
awesome.
one of
Hi.
our Sentient students. He's been showing up a lot in these live streaming events, which is good.
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. Learn a whole bunch from different artists, and I mean, it's a way of networking.
Right? You show up and then you talk, and now I know who he is, and
oh yeah,
he knows who we are, and that's kind of part of the point of this networking. And a lot of the networking we're talking about, it's real networking, right? Really get to know people, not sit at home and look at social media. Like, there is only that much you can network on social media.
Yeah.
Like,
doing it is still important, but to find events to go to, and yeah, it can be really awesome.
Yeah, because if you know someone in person, it's more likely that they would refer you or bring opportunity when it comes across. Because Casey Charles will probably not gonna refer you if he just met you on internet.
Yeah. To have those personal relationships and connections are really important. And also, like, if you are just willing to like give information and be helpful, and the community, the artist community, will definitely give back. And with information and just giving recommendations, and yeah, it can be pretty awesome.
That's what I love about it. Just helping artists all day, every day. It's very rewarding for me, because you know these people, they are really great people to work with.
It's an awesome community, and they're so grateful. And yeah, it can just be really awesome. So at this stage, this is part of my weakness, I try to stay in bigger brushes, which is always good because it keeps the shapes, it forces you to stay in the bigger shapes. But I love working with the tiny details. So again, I try to stay in the bigger brushes, but at this stage I usually start to go into some of those smaller brushes. Usually I have one smaller brush that I get super attached to. And just like use it until it breaks, and then have to find another one, and it's a little bit obnoxious. It's a little sad. My brush dies.
Do you have a ceremony for dead brushes?
I mean, kind of, but I sadly throw them away. And
in honor of my dead brush. Oh
man. Another cool thing about cicadas is a lot of times why we don't see, like, because they're called nymphs before their adult form, but they burrow quite deep underground to feed off of tree sap, but they burrow 8 feet sometimes underground.
Wait, what?
Which is insane. It's just so deep. But yeah, and you can actually, people who study trees notice that they could predict when the cicadas, the year before the cicadas would emerge, they noticed the trees would be highly stunted in growth, and it affects the tree rings because they're feeding off the tree sap so much.
Oh.
It actually like stops the trees from growing. But then the year after, from all the dead cicada carcasses,
The tree will grow.
the tree will like grow so much faster from all the. So it gives back to the trees, which is cool, but it's like kind of crazy.
First, you gotta get stunted before you can grow.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people, especially with the periodical 17-year cicadas, they always like, they're such big pests and they're so noisy, and they're actually just so good for the environment and for the animals. They basically, because they use the 17-year thing is a really good defense mechanism against predators. Because predators can't have them as a reliable food source. I mean, you can't wait 17 years for a meal.
Yeah, and then you will be hungry.
Yeah. But there's so many of them that basically they allow themselves to gorge the predators until they can't do anything because they're just so full. And then they're like, okay, we're done. We'll leave you guys alone. Do your thing.
Elliot has a question.
Yeah.
So he's noticed that when artists do studies, they often keep the background unfinished. Is that due to time constraints?
Sometimes for me, yeah. Because it's not the most important thing that I want to get in. I want some of the background in. But when I'm doing a study, I go do the background if I'm needing to kind of take my eye off of the main subject. Sometimes taking your eye away and then looking at it again, you kind of get a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
And that's when I'll work on the background. So if I'm not doing a lot of that, usually the background ends up being unfinished. So sometimes it can be a time. Yeah.
And then do you
Often
finish the
it is.
background at home after?
Sometimes I like it unfinished. Kind of has a different element to it. But yeah, sometimes I'll go home and finish it up or add some more texture with a palette knife to the background just to create some interest.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
So even though you're painting an insect, but all this training knowledge, they just kind of come out like normal, right?
Yeah, having the classical training has been huge. Like people ask what books, and the Burke book is awesome, and just studying a lot of those academic books can be just so incredibly helpful. And a lot of people just don't enjoy the academic studies. I mean, sometimes they can be boring. I enjoyed them a lot, just because they kind of remind me of scientific studies that I saw, which I really enjoy. So I found them enjoyable, but they can really push helping learn how to draw and with painting. And so even now I use some of those basic elements, like breaking down into the big geometric shapes, and kind of enveloping the insect and grouping it together. I mean, that's something I learned from the very beginning with like learning from a lot of those academic books.
And then color temperature too. That's a lot of things that a lot of artists will be missing out there when they focus too much on the color itself rather than the temperature.
Yeah, so for me, like, I think of drawing first. Is my drawing accurate? Because if your drawing's not accurate, if you're trying to make a realistic representation of something, if something's slightly off, even if the color's amazing, even like the edges are amazing, the person viewing it is going to look at it and be like, something's not quite right. Yeah. So I check the drawing first, and then usually I check the values next, because why the values are important after the drawing is, I'm sure you've seen like those portraits where they have just the funkiest colors. And the colors can be crazy, but because the values are correct and that separation of light and dark is accurate, it creates the form, and you look at it, and even if the portrait is like green in neon colors, it will look accurate because the values in drawing are correct. And then after that, I like to do the color, because color is important, like with the color temperature, and you're creating interest. And then after that, I like to focus on edges, because edges can really give the illusion of emotion in your painting. It was actually funny, because I'm not great with, I'm a very logical painter and not an emotional painter at all, which sometimes bugs people, because they're like, you should like paint emotionally and like have this emotional attachment. Like, I like painting insects because I'm like copying facts. That's like the logical side of it. But I mean, I do enjoy insects. So I mean, you could say that's emotion. So early in my career, people were saying my paintings weren't emotional. So I was trying, which they had something, because they weren't as enjoyable to look at. So I did actually some research on what makes a painting seem more emotional, and certain like shapes and edges can actually trigger and light up certain parts of the brain and make it more emotional. Yeah.
At the same time, that's logic. Okay?
Yeah, it's logical, but yeah, so I had to research the brain of how to make my paintings more emotionally invoking for people. Yeah. But I mean, it worked, and a big part of that was edges. Edges and using certain colors. That's partly why I do some circles in some of my paintings, is 'cause circles can light up certain parts of the brain and in like trigger certain emotions when they're like combined with different colors. And so yeah, that can be kind of fun, researching emotion with how it lights up the brain. But I mean, it got a good response. It was funny because after I did the first painting where I started breaking up some of the edges, and like I got a response where like, wow, you're like, all of a sudden you're like tapping into your emotion. And I'm like,
no,
I researched. Yeah,
research.
But it was pretty funny.
Yeah. People believe what they want to believe.
Yeah, well, art is so subjective. It's really funny. People are always like, what's the symbolism behind your art with the insects and circles? I'm like, I just like circles.
It triggers the part of your brain that makes you think there's something deeper. That's like, what it is.
Honestly, looks cool. I like circles. Scientifically, it works. But yeah, it's pretty fun. But it is quite fascinating how much science there is behind art. And like, you wouldn't think of art as something very scientific or having a science to it, but there's like even like mixing the paint and the colors is a science. And like,
okay, we got another question here.
Awesome.
Does she have to kill the bugs to paint them?
No. So I do get this question and concern a lot about, do I kill insects? No. So I buy a lot of my insects online through shops that raise them for science and they live their full lifespan. They
So eventually
they're
they
raised
do
for
die
this.
naturally.
Oh yeah, most insects have a very short lifespan, like incredibly short. And I raise a lot of them. Like recently, I raised a
So you do raise
giant.
some of
Yeah,
them
yeah,
yourself.
and I love raising them. They're so much fun to raise, and you just learn so much about the insect. And then afterwards, then I get to paint them, and it's great. So like recently, I was raising a yucca giant skipper, which are awesome. But they're super easy to take care of because they're a moth. They're a butterfly, but they actually don't have a mouth in their adult form.
Oh wait, they
so
don't have those straw mouth?
yeah, they don't eat food
Oh.
in their adult form. Actually, a surprisingly
Wait, what?
large amount of moths are born without mouths, and they don't eat in their adult form, so they're super easy to take care of that way with food-wise. Yeah, so then I just get to observe them and watch them and make them happy in their habitat, and then they die in about 2 weeks, and
There you go.
there we go.
So, does she keep them as pets and let them die? Okay, that was answered.
Yes. So I keep them as pets, and then yeah, some of the earlier ones.
Pets.
The earlier ones that I had when I was really little, because I've raised insects for a long time. Some of those have names. Eventually became ridiculous to name them all because they live so short and there's so many.
Where's Charlie?
Exactly.
Who is Charlie? You know, the one that lived for like 2 days?
Yeah.
2 days ago?
It's like
that?
the 10th cicada I owned. That one. It's like, oh, okay.
10 cicadas ago.
Yeah, it's like...
Charlie. Okay, where is he now? Well, it's dead. It's been dead for 10 days. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It gets ridiculous.
It gets a little ridiculous.
Okay, let's talk about like the wings. It's really just translucent. Right?
Yeah, they're translucent, so I pull a lot of the background color. Sometimes I darken. You can see on mine I've darkened the background color just slightly, just to give the illusion of that there is something in front of it. And they're quite translucent. So, and with the membrane of the wings is so delicate. So I try to lay down, again, I am going into smaller shapes, but I'm trying to keep it pretty grouped together. And sometimes I find if you add all the detail in the insect's wings, it almost makes it less realistic because there's just so much information. And so if I kind of squint at the insect, it groups a lot of the shapes together. So then I know which shapes are the most important. So I'll kind of take those shapes that I'm seeing and paint those, and then just add a couple of details here and there, because just to suggest, like if I squint, I can barely see any of these fine veins in the wings over the highlight of that wing. So usually I'll leave a lot of those out until the very end, just finally put a couple of hints that those veins are there, just because I'm not wanting a lot of hard lines.
So how long have you been doing this professionally?
That's kind of hard to say. I've never had a job. This is all I've ever done, is just painting or teaching here and there.
Fun.
And yeah, it has been awesome. And yeah, so learning to do that, there's been ups and downs, but yeah, it has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
So now the background, are you gonna do some bright colors for the background?
Yeah, so usually I'll take almost the white. I can show you real quick. I need a little bit more white. Usually I like to do a brighter highlight against, kind of on the light side of the canvas to really kind of help separate that light and dark and define that this is the light side and this is where the light is coming from. So sometimes I'll take a really bright color, try to avoid doing straight white. So sometimes I'll add a slight
Again,
yellow
you're thinking
tint.
color temperature right there.
Yeah. Just add some slight color to it, but I want it pretty bright of a color. Then I can just throw that, and some of this I'll use also to make a sharp edge against the wing. Just so that I'm not wanting everything to be so soft, so I can kind of drag some of that and make some thick paint, and also a brighter highlight. And it can just create some fun texture too. And try to stay in the big general shapes for just as long as possible. I don't tend to go to like very fine details until even sometimes the last 30 minutes of my painting. Usually when I'm doing an insect to a really finished stage, it takes a few hours. But like very small amount is dedicated to the details. Because again, the most important part is I'm wanting to get that drawing accurate and the values accurate and the colors before I have anything else. Which is kind of funny because when you look at my finished paintings, people like comment on the details a lot, which I do really enjoy having. Yeah. But usually those details I throw in last minute.
Yeah.
So this is where you can see I'm starting to curve the wings and put some of those curves in and make it a little less of a geometric shape. So I'm correcting the drawing.
And a good way to kind of do that is you overpaint it and then carve it back in.
Yeah, so I'm using the background to carve it back in as I go.
Instead of just doing like a perfect drawing. By the way, I'm painting too and I'm making a mess because I just dropped my paintbrush. I love doing these insect paintings with you because it's so fun.
I know, they're really enjoyable to paint. I mean, I've had some who like with my workshops and stuff, when they've done the insects, I've had people like who hate insects painting. They're like, oh, that was actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
And it's like, you kind of get a different viewpoint of the insect, which is always enjoyable for me to see someone come to love an insect because they painted it. I'm like, yes, converted another insect lover. So it's not, a lot of people get a little creeped out with insects, especially the beetles. For some reason, people don't like beetles that much. I mean, they either like love them or like they don't. That and also spiders. Spiders aren't that popular for people.
Have you painted any spiders?
I haven't yet. It is on my list. I'm really wanting a blue tarantula.
I was totally thinking that in my head.
Because they would be so gorgeous to paint. Those blue legs and...
Really fuzzy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I used to have... I'm a little sad. I used to have a pet black widow growing up. And it was a good-sized black widow. It was gorgeous. Oh. And I was like, oh, I'm so sad I didn't keep it long enough to, like, paint it. But that would have been awesome. I did draw it a lot.
Just kind of like, hey, come on, pose for me.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're great posers. Didn't move a lot unless it was like time to feed her. And then it was like crazy to see her move. It's a great pet. I mean, can't hold it or touch it, but really easy to take care of. So sometimes when I'm doing a study, I like to focus on, you can see this a lot with my insect drawings. When I'm doing a sketchbook study of an insect, usually I kind of like to put a time limit on myself, just so I don't get, again, too caught up in the details. But also part of it is because of the time restraint, sometimes I don't have a lot of time to make this super hyper detailed and realistic everywhere. Mm-hmm. So usually I like to pick the highlight side when I'm doing a study to really focus on and do a lot of details on. And it almost kind of lets it fade away and soften, which having those lost edges, again, can create emotion, but also can create more interest and allows you to really focus on one part, which is really nice.
Okay, I've got another question here.
Mm-hmm.
Has she ever wanted to do any insect exploring, like head into the Amazon rainforest?
Oh, yes. I love entomology, and I mean, I do a lot of that around here in Utah, but oh my gosh, yes. That would be amazing to just be able to go. I was looking into a trip a while ago before all the crazy COVID stuff happened, to go to Costa Rica. And I was getting a license to go collect insects there. And because they are very picky on
who can go and what you can do there.
What you can collect there, and yeah, like with some, because you can't collect certain species that are endangered. Like one species, for example, is like the Alexander birdwing moth in the Amazon, which is, it's one of the butterfly. They're one of the largest, they're the largest butterfly in the world. They're massive. They're so big that, in fact, when you're not allowed to collect them now because they're endangered, because when they were first discovered, they were big enough they couldn't catch it because it was so high up in the canopy, that it was big enough they were able to shoot it down with a shotgun, which is crazy. Like, who shoots a butterfly with a shotgun? Like, so like in the museum, some of the first specimens discovered have shotgun holes in them. Like, that's nuts. But it's like,
it's a butterfly we're talking about here.
I know, a butterfly. Like, seriously, it's like, it's a butterfly. How am I going to catch it? I'm going to shoot it with a shotgun. But yeah, so they, like, you can't catch any of those. Is some protected species, but even the ones that are quite common, they are quite protective over carrying them on a plane. And I'm like, I mean, it's kind of funny to think of getting arrested for carrying dead butterflies on a plane, but it's a thing. I mean, which I'm glad for, to have the rules, but they're good to have.
So is there any bigger projects that you're working on, like as far as painting?
I'm doing some, I actually just got an order of some really cool large insects and butterflies and moths that I'm getting ready to do. I'm starting to put insects more of just less doing a single insect and doing some multiple insects together.
Oh, you want to show that one you brought today?
Yeah, so I brought, and
So
we can show it.
Because we don't want to forget that.
Should we show it right now, or?
Yes, it's sold, so if you don't see it now, it'll be gone.
That's true. I mean, I did post it on my Instagram too, but
today we get to see it in person.
Yes.
In a way.
I don't know if the camera can see it, but
let's see. To that side, like over your palette.
Okay, right there.
Right there.
Yeah. So like these are all insects from Thailand that I got, but yeah. So this is kind of an example of an insect that I've pulled into more detail with more time, but yeah. So that's been really fun. So doing some larger series of that. So right now I'm working on a series of 3 rhinoceros beetles, which are pretty fun.
And if they want to see the progress, they gotta go follow you.
Follow my Instagram, and I'll post in my stories like progress of I just finished drawing out the background of that one, the design I'm doing, because the beetles like they live in a lot of rotting wood. So I'm doing a lot of more wet plants, like mushroom and fungus. Usually when I do plants in the backgrounds of my paintings, most of the time there's a few paintings that are an exception. But most of the time I do their host plants of the insects. So the plants that the insects live on or eat are usually the plants I'll add in the background. Sometimes I pick other plants just for design qualities. Sometimes the host plants they like are not really that interesting looking. But so in that case, I'll usually pick something else. Like I was painting a beetle.
We have 5 minutes left.
Oh wow!
Man, time flies.
Time flies. I'll throw in a leg real quick so you can kind of see how I do that. Usually I lean the legs more red. In general, just because they're so thin, it can give that warmth. But yeah, I was painting a beetle and I was thinking I might throw in some plants in the background, and it was an African beetle, and it's a pest in Africa. They don't like them there because they eat all the crops. And like their favorite plants are potatoes and pineapple. I'm like, that's such a weird combination, but couldn't find a way to put like potato plant very prettily in the background, so it's like I'll do something else.
Thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been awesome.
It's been fun seeing all these different beetles and just having a chance to see them in real life. I mean,
oh yeah.
I'm here. I get to see it in front of me, but you guys get to see the recording of it.
Yeah, it can be a different experience to see them like in real life and be like, what? Especially like the big moths. It's crazy. So because it's towards the end, I'm throwing in a couple of highlights that I see on
That's how you carve
the body.
it in, because you have the texture of the background thick.
Yeah, so I have the texture really thick, so I can
dark
just
in there.
carve in that dark of the leg. Which is really fun. I'll pop that bright red on the leg on there.
Everybody has a different way of painting, and that's why painting is so fun, and that's why you want to network and see everybody's work.
Well, because you can see,
ideas.
yeah. Well, that's what's so cool about Sentient Academy is you can learn from a large variety of artists, which is super cool because then you can apply like different principles that you learn from like, okay, I really like how that artist did this. And you can apply that to your own painting and eventually you get this really well-rounded foundation.
And there's always that benefit of studying under one master.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you study with Casey Charles,
that was
you
a
grow
huge
a lot,
benefit.
right?
But
At the
even
same time, there's
while I was
experiments.
doing that, I was reading about other artists and watching other artists paint.
It's gotta grow your horizon as an
Yeah.
artist. Everything is gonna. Everybody has something to teach.
Oh yeah.
And you always have something to learn from everybody. Some people might think, well, I'm not an insect artist. Why? Well, there are a lot of things you can learn from this.
It's a very similar principles, like what we talked about before with like learning from sculpting. I'm like, I'm not a sculptor, but I can learn so much about painting through watching a sculpture. It's like it's similar. It's different, but it's a similar principles that are applied throughout. With like finding the bigger shapes first. I mean, obviously, sculptors don't start with highly detailed. They start with those bigger shapes first, and even watching like watercolor painters, learned a whole bunch from. I'm like, I don't do watercolor that often, but I can learn a whole bunch from the way they do the colors and start with some of them I've seen start with like a posterized look, and I really liked how that kind of helped me see stuff better. And so applying those principles, you can learn just so much from a large variety of artists.
Well, it's 5 o'clock, but
right.
If you want to wrap it up, or we can just kind of paint a little bit.
Yeah.
Just take it to a closer finish.
Yeah.
So once you go, I don't have this bug, and I don't want to do it from photograph because I lose the fun.
Yeah, you lose that. It's that different dimension. Like when I was talking to Vern, he's like, one advantage of learning how to draw from life first before you do like draw from photographs and stuff, but that advantage of drawing from life is you're taking something 3D and turning it into something 2D. Where when you work from a photograph, if you don't, you're taking from 2D and
copying.
Also, so you lose that extra dimension. Where if you have, like when I'm doing a drawing from a photograph, because I have that prior knowledge from working from life, I can apply that and it can be just super helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, so like talking about the background, I'm kind of liking how the texture I created and not wanting to lose some of that. So I might not go back in and finish some of that background just because I'm liking that texture.
And that's an important skill to have, is decide when to call it good and not touch it.
Sometimes it can be hard.
Yeah, you just kind of like, let me just do that, and then you ruin it.
Yeah, it can be super easy to do that.
Especially edge work. If you get a good edge going, just leave it.
Usually I try to make the shadows pretty soft. in just a couple of these little lines to add some of that extra detail. This is where I'm just kind of hinting at some of those details, and I'm trying not to overly put them in. Sometimes I find when I'm doing a finished painting, sometimes I go too detailed, so then I just knock some of it back down and group some of the shapes back together, just because I'm not wanting to lose that overall form that I have.
Oh, in a couple weeks we have Heather Olsen to do a butterfly. That will be fun.
Oh yeah,
because hers has got a different look too.
Oh, I love her work.
I know.
It's awesome.
So dynamic in a way.
Well, again, with I love her edges, and she breaks them up, but
I know,
yeah, that will be really
I have
fun.
a hard time doing stuff like that. I just can't seem to find the right balance to break them up like the way she does it.
Yeah, that will be awesome.
So, can't wait for that.
Yeah, it's fun. I follow a bunch of different people that do insect paintings, and I love just the variety that there is of approaches. It's pretty fun.
Sometimes you carve it too much, then you have to fix it.
Sometimes, when I have to fix it, I just end up taking the palette knife and re-scraping it.
Yeah.
It's
that's some learning moments too. If you can do it once, you can do it twice.
Oh yeah. And also with color, I like to think of a lot of times right before something turns into shadow, it gets super saturated. So I like to take some super saturated colors as I go and just kind of hit right before, even you can see right before I hit the shadow with the body, I'm throwing in some just solid blues.
Do you mind if I grab a tiny bit white?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can totally grab some.
Here? Okay, thanks. Sometimes you get lazy when it gets to the end. You're like, I don't want to squeeze out more.
More paint, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of almost done.
Yeah, I heard somewhere in Casey's studio, I can't remember if he said or he heard it from somewhere, but it's like to squeeze paint out as if you were very wealthy.
Yeah, I heard that too. I can't remember.
Yeah, I someone said it. I can't imagine, remember exactly who, but
it's gotta be someone from around here.
Yeah,
So if we both
probably.
heard it, then it's gotta be someone we might know. Oh, missed a question here. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
When you have such a focused subject matter, is it better to leave the background plain so that the attention is immediately drawn to the subject?
It depends on paint. A lot of my paintings, when you go on my Instagram, are just like a solid color. But sometimes I'll have like the host plants in the background, but I generally keep the host plants almost graphical in a way, and just because I want the main focus to be the insect, but not necessarily. I've seen some people who paint insects, especially like a whole bunch of insects, where they'll have it very busy with a bunch of like jars or full of other insects. But then the subject matter, I guess, isn't one particular insect. It does broaden it a little bit. But yeah, for me, because I'm trying to keep the subject the main focus, and because I'm doing just like one insect or even a few insects on a canvas, usually my background is pretty simple.
Then let's look at the. Oh, I'm just looking at my own
Oh yeah.
part. Like the shadow, as it goes away from the subject, it gets softer.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the little, like really, I'm talking about such little detail that can really bring you
really
your work
make
to the
the painting.
professional
Oh yeah.
level, right? Like if you look at some of the work between a professional and a amateur work, you look at the edge work, you look at shadows, the temperature, all those things. Well, to me, they are the make it or break it parts.
Oh yeah. Well, with like the edges, because noticing those things, it takes a different. You can tell if someone has had training or developed that eye to be able to see some of those little subtleties. But it's kind of. I was thinking about this actually recently. Like when you look at when a child, or like when my 4-year-old nephew is showing some of his work or something, his eyes see differently than mine because I've trained my eyes to see different things. So the way he sees things, like some of it I think is a gift for kids, where like when I'm teaching kids, they think their work is like the best in the whole world. And
they are.
And it is, like for what they're able to see, it is like the best in the whole world. And it's so fun to see what they be able to see. But you can see as their eyes develop, they start being able to see more and their art develops. It's kind of fascinating sometimes what kids see. Like a lot of kids go through that like potato person stage, which I love, where it's like a circle with like the legs, and it's like yeah, and it's like where's the neck, and but to them with what their eyes see, it's really fascinating with like the brain development. And
I'm gonna break out my knife. Do some knife work. If I can get it right. So do you want? I love your palette knife. For the texture and all that. Do you want to give us a quick, just like what kind of knife you use and some tips on using different knives for different textures?
I've always used like the same size palette knife. It's just this one. I don't even know what it is. I've had it for years. It says it's a 6. But yeah, I kind of just had it ever since I was little. And it's been quite handy and useful, but usually I just use the edge. I like this one because it has a point to it, so I can really get into like small areas to kind of dig in there, and then I just use the edge and kind of scrape. And then kind of releasing pressure towards the end, which kind of creates this nice kind of broken up edges,
I love
which
that. I just like kind
really
of
like.
it just mushed into the surface,
canvas,
but you have some surface showing through. I think that's the most attractive part to me.
No, I really enjoy it. And yeah, I mean, it's taken some practice of, like with the bigger paintings, just playing around over and over. Sometimes the palette knife work sometimes can take quite a long time to try to get it where I'm happy. Sometimes you don't have, it's not a tool where you have a lot of control. You do have some control,
too.
but
That's
consistency with it.
It could work this time, and next time when you think, oh, I did it last time, I'm just gonna,
do the same marks, but it never quite comes out exactly the same.
And I think that's why the knife texture is so fascinating. Is
none
of them will be the same.
No, it can be really engaging and interesting. So sometimes I'll do a scrape and I don't like it, so I'll just scrape it off and try it again.
Or even like Heather Olsen, she would just break up the shapes.
Oh yeah.
With scrapers. That's what she used.
Yeah, to find that tool other than a brush can be really effective to kind of create that interest in different textures.
Oh, guess who's watching here?
Who?
Heather.
Oh, awesome. Hi.
Hey.
We're just talking about you.
We were talking about you, all good things. So, one of her professors used to say that too, pen is cheap. Pen like you're a millionaire. I'm so glad you were there.
Yes, because we were just talking about that.
Yeah, we're just talking about her. That's awesome. See that again? That's networking, right?
Yep.
We're all here, growing, learning together, and the more you socialize with people, the more you get to know people and help you grow and all that stuff. All the good stuff will come with it.
Oh yeah.
We're testing out the studio for you, Heather. We just set up this recording studio over the weekend.
Yeah, it looks pretty awesome.
Thanks. Nothing fancy. Outside of camera shot, it's probably just some ghetto downstairs bedroom setup. But
well, sometimes like a lot of people are surprised that I don't have like a professional studio. Like I still paint in the kitchen. I mean, someday when I have my own home and like I'm not renting, or I'll have that someday, but it's very doable.
It doesn't really take that much
to
do a lot of great work. It's really about the time that you spend.
The time management and
the more time you spend on painting, the better you get. But if you just have fancy equipment, that.
Yeah, a lot of like I was talking to some artists that were wanting to get into painting. They were frustrated because they didn't have like money to buy a studio or like a fancy easel, or I'm like, you don't really need that to paint professionally. I mean, it's really nice and it can be helpful in the time management and
there's always that kind of what do I need and what do I want thing, right? Like do I need all that to paint? No, you don't.
Yeah, like
do you want that? Yes, you do, but is it really about wanting it? And
especially if you're like just starting out, you don't have to start with insanely expensive fancy easel and
you won't paint better.
No.
We can tell you right now.
You gotta start painting somewhere, like.
Yeah. It's the hours that you put in that will make a difference, and the sooner you get those hours in, should you say hi, guys? Gotta wrap this up because I can smell my dinner. Not a bug. You don't get any bugs, right?
Oh yeah, I actually I do eat insects.
We had that conversation last time.
We did. It was quite fun. I did a lot of survival camp things as a kid, but yeah, a lot of, and that's part of where like the love of insects, I guess, is a part of that too. But yeah, a lot of eating bugs, I guess, too. They aren't actually that bad.
It's mental.
It is all mental.
And I really gotta get this leg in right. I'm getting to the point where I'm like
Starting to get those little details.
I wanna get it done.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's quite easy on these insects to spend like hours. I've definitely gotten a lot faster with the insects. Used to be that I would spend like sometimes 2 days on an insect, which I mean is relatively short compared to
A portrait?
my portraits. Yeah. But I have gotten quite a bit faster at being able to. I mean, accuracy comes with practice and time. But yeah, it's been pretty fun.
So how are you doing, Heather? You are the pro there. You can give us a little.
Yeah, her butterflies are so awesome. I always enjoy when I see like another artist who paints insects, because I'm like,
Someone's
like,
thinking
yes.
the same thing.
yeah, it's always super fun. Yeah, I just got a huge order of butterflies and moths, and I'm super excited. Got some, like I got a Ulysses butterfly, which are like bright blue.
Ooh.
And those are pretty cool. I've seen Heather paint some of those. They're super gorgeous.
Well, we should see. We'll ask her all those things.
Oh yeah, all the tips.
Gotta wrap this thing up.
Yeah. To throw a few punches of this hot orange line. It's a characteristic that's pretty common in cicadas, to have some of those outlines with the veins.
So besides painting, what else do you do?
I do astronomy. I do some astrophotography, which is pretty fun. Sometimes that calls for late nights, but yeah, a lot of entomology stuff, exploring outdoors, hiking.
It's a great place
Yeah.
to be hiking here.
Oh, it's awesome. There's like so many good hikes, and
Those red legs in there. Those two little red marks on their legs, are they kind of specific to this type of cicadas?
a
Or?
lot of cicadas, they're specific to the Splendida family, but they are on some other cicadas, like trying to think of some other species, but they're mainly characteristic to the Splendida family.
I'm not liking the shape over here of my shadow. So, too long.
Yeah, cicadas are pretty awesome. They're one of my favorites. So just so many cool things about them. They're just so wacky.
I love when you post something about, your work, you will give us the facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love talking about insects, so it's kind of like almost a breath of relief. Like, got some facts out there. But, yeah, it's always pretty enjoyable. It's pretty fun because, a lot of people don't know a whole bunch about insects unless they're studying them or entomologists.
So Elliot is really saying thanks to go a bit longer because it's a good distraction for all this stuff that's going on out there.
Oh yeah. It's been a little crazy.
I mean, it's good to kind of listen to the news, but at the same time, I just enjoy just going to the studio and zone out a bit.
It's been really nice and insects are crazy, but in a different way, so it's a nice refreshing. Shouldn't we just learn about crazy things about insects? It's a nice break.
Okay. Oh, I forgot the legs. Maybe that's why it looks funny. These big legs back here. Something just doesn't look right.
It's fun if you're around the 17-year periodical cicadas. You can mimic the female sound by snapping your fingers because they make a clicking rather than the males, which you usually hear, which are the loud screeching sound. So you can get the males to follow you by snapping your fingers. You can find the males that way.
So kidnap them like, hey, come over here.
Uh-huh. It's pretty funny.
That little highlight. I love this kind of paintings where you have most of them in the dark and then you just basically pop in the highlight to suggest the structure of it.
I really enjoy popping in some of those highlights and the lighter.
It doesn't take much, right?
No, it doesn't take a lot to really add
a sense of form.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll just throw in a few extra darks just to kind of almost counters those bright highlights, make them pop more.
I think we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon here, but thank you guys for watching. We're just having fun here.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And if you guys are Sentient students, don't forget we're having this gigantic giveaway promotion coming up for June. We have it finalized today. It's sending out pretty fast here. Maybe you get it probably tomorrow morning or something. What we're doing is to show people how much we love Sentient, and what you have to do is to create a creative video showing how you use Sentient Academy. A good one will be before and after, show your progress, and just post it on social media. We'll have the rules up, and just enjoy the drawing. We're giving away $10,000 in total prizes. There will be 1 year pass, and blah blah blah. Trickle Art Supplies giving us a pretty good, decent gift package. You get, one of each of their brushes and panels and all kind of stuff. And we have $150 gift certificate from Masterworks Frames, and of course Strata easels. If you guys want to win a Strata, actually we're gonna give out a vertical palette and a Strata mask, which is the one I'm using right now, and a Strata micro. And of course our Sentient courses, we're giving away a whole bunch of lifetime courses too, so don't want to miss that. And of course next Monday we'll have Elizabeth Robbins doing her roses.
That'll be awesome.
Yep, I was just testing out the tech with her today, and it went well. We spent a lot of time making sure everything's gonna work well. She's just amazing. So that's what's coming up, and later on we'll have Brian Marteller's workshop. It's a landscape plein air workshop where he'll be painting outdoors during evening time, so it'd be kind of cool to see how he managed the fast light changing effect and capture that in as little strokes, as few strokes as possible, and just the whole month filled with workshops and all the stuff going on. So we'll see you next week, or all this awesome stuff going on. So I think we're just gonna say goodbye. If I can manage to go over there and turn it off. Okay, well, thank you everybody.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Let's see. Ah.